Have you ever been absolutely positive you remember something happening one way, only to find out that everyone else remembers it differently? Maybe you're adamant that the Berenstain Bears was spelled Berensteinsteinste, only to find out that the spelling was always Berensteinstein. Or perhaps you could swear that actor and activist Charlton Heston never played Moses in the 1956 film, The Ten Commandments. But when you bring up your argument online, you discover that almost everyone else has a completely different memory of these things. And worst of all, they have the receipts to prove it. In each of these cases, the memories are so vivid for those who have them that they seem real. So how can we be so sure that what we remember is correct? More importantly, if other people do remember things differently, does that mean that our reality is actually changing? These questions have led scientists, conspiracy theorists, and lab people to ponder whether we're reliving in a simulated reality that can be rewritten at will by some unknown entity, or whether there may be more than one timeline, and we're somehow shifting between them. This is the Mandela Effect. The term Mandela Effect is derived from the most famous example of this supposed phenomenon, which concerns the former South African president, Nelson Mandela. You see, according to the Mandela Effect, many people remembered that Nelson Mandela died in prison in the 1980s, when in reality he was released in 1990 and lived until 2013. If we go back far enough, we can find newspaper clippings, TV footage, and photographs that show people wearing Free Nelson Mandela shirts and holding up signs at protests. So it seems clear that he was a well-known political prisoner in the minds of the public during the 80s. But this also means that his release in 1990 should have been one of the biggest news stories of the year. It would have made headlines around the world, and people should have been able to recall significant details about it. But those same people don't seem to remember it at all. Either they were under the impression that he died or that he was still alive but living in exile. Now, there are millions of examples like this where people seem to have collective false memories, like the spelling of the children's book series. The Berenstain Bears or whether actress and singer Barbra Streisand's nose was noticeably larger in the 80s. But is it really possible for our reality to be rewritten so that an entire population suddenly forgets something that they definitely remember? How do we know that the memories we're relying on are any more accurate than those that have been erased? And could this be evidence that we're shifting timelines, or is there another explanation? If you ask most scientists, the answer is simple. There is no evidence to support the idea that our reality is being rewritten. Instead, the Mandela Effect is probably nothing more than a trick of the mind known as the confabulation effect. This occurs when someone mistakenly remembers something that never happened, but because they are confident that it did, they fill in the gaps with details that fit their narrative, often taking those details from other memories or even from things they've heard secondhand. And over time, this fake memory can become indistinguishable from the real ones. There are several ways that this might occur, such as the spreading activation theory, which proposes that memories are stored in networks of neurons, and when you retrieve one memory, it activates other related memories, allowing incorrect associations to creep in. Or the trauma theory, which states that memories are more likely to be confabulated when they're associated with a strong emotion, like fear or excitement. On top of that, people who claim to experience the Mandela Effect tend to be the same people who are drawn to paranormal phenomena and conspiracy theories. According to psychologist and author Scott Ullin, this group of people is prone to believing in alternative realities and is willing to interpret ambiguous evidence in a way that confirms their beliefs. For example, a study published in the Journal of Parapsychological Research found that 70% of people who believed that they witnessed a UFO also believed Elvis Presley was still alive, and researchers suspect that these two beliefs may feed into one another. People who believe in conspiracy theories are more likely to interpret ambiguous evidence as proof that their beliefs are true, which makes those beliefs even more entrenched. But while psychologists have a pretty good idea of why the Mandela Effect happens, they're not exactly sure why it happens to some people and not others. One factor that seems to play a role is how much attention people pay to memory distortions as they happen. A 2013 study found that people who were more aware of the Mandela Effect were more likely to report experiencing it. This suggests that once people start thinking about the Mandela Effect, they become primed to notice instances of it in their everyday lives, leading them to remember more examples of it happening. So if this is all just a figment of our imaginations, how do we know that our memories are any more reliable than the ones that we've To answer that question, scientists have developed a number of techniques to identify false memories, such as presenting people with a list of items and then asking them to recall as many as they can. When the list contains both real and fake items, people tend to remember the fake ones just as well as the real ones, suggesting that they're not any less real simply because they're not true. They've still been encoded, stored, and retrieved from the brain just like any other memory. With that said, Some researchers argue that the Mandela Effect is actually a genuine phenomenon that can occur when people are exposed to misinformation or when their memories are altered by outside forces. In a 2018 study, researchers presented participants with a series of statements and asked them to indicate whether they remembered them hearing them before. Some of the statements were real and others were fake. And what the researchers found was that people were just as likely to remember fake statements as real ones, especially when the fake statements were presented alongside the real ones. This suggests that people's memories can be equally altered by new information. What this means is that our memories are like a patchwork quilt made up of real and fake patches. We can't always tell where one starts and the other ends. So how do we know which ones are real and which ones are fake? The answer, according to some researchers, is that we don't. There's no way to know for sure. All we can do is try to piece together the most accurate account of the past that we can based on the evidence that is available to us. Okay, but what if some external force is intentionally rewriting our reality? Even if that were the case, it's unlikely that it would affect everyone equally. For example, if you grew up in the United States, you might remember American presidents in a different order than someone who grew up in the UK. But if you started talking to people about it, they'd all agree that Abraham Lincoln was the 16th president and Ronald Reagan was the 40th. That's because even though we might remember different things, we all agree on the general outlines of history. We just disagree on the details. This suggests that our memories aren't being instead, they're being reshaped by our individual experiences and biases. So while it's fun to speculate about the possibility of shifting timelines or alternate realities, the Mandela Effect is probably nothing more than a trick of the mind. But let us know in the comments below what you think. And thanks for watching.